Hi, everybody. I'm going to do upload tonight because I was remiss in doing it on the last show, the one from last night, where I was going to do some UFO stuff. I never did, and it's been a long time since I've done any UFO videos. Plus, I wanted to try out doing the live stuff from my laptop instead of my phone, which is different, but it should at least allow me to see the messages a little better. I'm going to type something in there just to see how it works. And so far, I think my lighting's terrible. Nothing new. I'll have to play with that a little bit more. Probably where I have it. But I'll get caught up with it. Hey, Patty, how are you? UFOs haven't done it in a while. First, I wanted to mention that news came out tonight about Bob Saget passing away. I like that guy. He was a pretty good comedian. He died in his hotel room in Orlando at the Ritz-Carlton, and looks pretty weird. He was only 65, and they didn't find any drugs or any foul play. And his the people that got into the room with the help of the hotel people and the police, and they didn't see anything suspicious around there. Of course, they haven't done an autopsy yet on the guy, so who knows if he took anything or not. But I think he had done a stand-up show earlier that evening, and something caused him to go check his room, and they found him deceased. So that's terrible. Yeah, it's awful about Bob Saget. I like that guy. um just really seemed like a nice guy. I think his sister had some kind of a weird disease that he kind of tried to champion. Where wasn't that one where you grow old too fast, but something like that, like her skin or something would get the elasticity in her skin would get really tight or something. I don't remember what they called that disease that his sister had. I think it eventually killed his sister, but he tried to do a lot to help with that disease or something like that. Yeah, he did. Great range of acting. Not just the Full House stuff. I mean, that's what he was known for, is Full House, of course. But his stand-up stuff was pretty good. It's pretty funny. Like she's saying, and he was clean too. He was one of the few really clean comedians that were still funny. So that's terrible. I mean, 65. I mean, he's had three daughters. That's terrible. I don't know what's going on with all these deaths coming out of nowhere from these otherwise uh, healthy people. Um, Half baked Full House funniest videos. Yeah, rest in peace, Bob. That's really bad. So if anything else develops on that, right, we'll bring it back up on the next live feed. But anyway, didn't get the UFOs yesterday and wanted to because I've been out of the UFO deal for so long. But I've used to love all the UFO stuff, coast to coast. Of course, Art Bell, can't get enough of Art Bell. I'm doing a show with a couple guys. I think on Tuesday it's going to be Zodiac stuff, but these guys are like real big Art Bell fans. So for that alone, I was going to definitely do their show for being Art Bell fans because I just love the old Art Bell days. I think a lot of the Art Bell shows I listen to were already pre-recorded. Not like the vault they do now on Coast to Coast, but I think it was a lot of the earlier stuff that was still pre-recorded because he took some time off after his first wife died. I remember when that happened though, when Art Bell's wife Ramona died, and he did an upload on that, or he did a show on that. I think just a few days after, and it was just, man, that was some gripping radio. It was really sad. It was really close to his wife. She had an asthma attack and woke up. I mean, didn't wake up the next morning when they were on a small trip. So that left an impression on me. But I loved all the art, early Art Bell stuff and all the UFO stories. Remember in the old days on Coast to Coast, people would just call in and tell UFO stories back to back to back. So at some point, they just quit taking them, and they started having on that one guy that would just kind of talk about all the different UFO sightings that came in or whatever, and he would go over that stuff. But people couldn't tell the one-offs anymore because they were just getting so many of them. But I have one, and it's really the only profound UFO story or the UFO incident I ever had happen. And it was sometime around 1991. I don't know the time of year, but unlike a lot of people, mine was not out in the boonies or something like that. It was in Houston, Texas, where I still live, and not in the same area. But at that time, it was near, if you know Houston, it was near the intersection of Deary Ashford and Westheimer Road. And that's still pretty populated part of town of a major city. So still quite a bit of light around. This wasn't out in the boonies. And I remember I was with a girlfriend of mine and my best friend, and we had gone out somewhere, probably had a few drinks, but we weren't like smoking hippie lettuce or anything like that. Just usual night, still kind of early, probably about 9 p.m. We were going back to his townhouse, and we pulled in a parking spot at his townhouse complex, And he looked up in the sky, and it was low clouds that night. And he said, "Look, man, shooting star." And I was like, "I don't see any shooting star. You can't. It's all these clouds. How could you see a shooting star?" And he goes, "No, man, effing right there." He goes, "It's a effing shooting star," or something like that. And these two balls of light came out of the clouds, and the clouds were really low, and they were chasing each other. It's just these little balls of light. And we looked at each other, me and my best friend, like, "Whoa, this is not normal." And then he said, "Effing UFO, man. What else could this be?" And the girl got out of the car, and she's already starting to bawl. "Ah!" This whole crazy thing, and we're like in awe of this thing. And a third ball came out, so you have these three balls coming out of the clouds, and they seem like they're kind of chasing each other. And then they would go out and make a triangle. Then they would kind of come back in and go out again, and then start moving in like a pattern again, up, in through the cloud. Couldn't see it, back out of the cloud. And we were just stunned, like, what is this? And this went on for like 10 minutes with these balls shooting in and out. And then my friend's mother, who was staying with him at the time, came out. She was from Pakistan, so she didn't even really speak English that well. And she came out and was looking up at the sky and all this going on. And she's freaking out, doing all this kind of stuff. And it made no noise whatsoever. But all of a sudden, all those balls just kind of came back a little lower under the cloud, shot back up into the cloud. And then you could see this, what must have been a massive triangle, just illuminated, and it was just sitting in that low cloud, or it made a perfect triangle. That's why you always hear these triangle craft. Well, this was an absolute perfect triangle. The ball shot up into it. Just really, it looked like these massive, like LED lights or something, and then it just got dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And it went on for like a good 20 minutes. And like I said, we were not in the boonies, pretty not far from a major intersection in Houston where there's still a lot of light, but it was low clouds. Nobody called in and reported it. Never heard anyone call into even coast to coast about this sighting. And I'm sure a lot of other people must have seen this. And it was stunning. But the weird thing about it is, when I went home that evening, went back, went to my room, and I was just flipping channels on, this was the earlier days of, it was 91. So there's still, when you were just starting to get a lot of channels on cable TV and stuff. And it was like every channel I went to was a UFO something. It was like, My Favorite Martian or ET. It was, or like a commercial that featured an alien. I mean, it was like they were trying to tell me they had control of this stuff. I'm not kidding. Yeah, I went to 7 channels, and it was all UFO related, just clicking. And that left a bigger impression on me than the actual sighting of that craft. So that was really spooky. So that's my UFO story. I don't know if anyone else has something like that, but um, Bill, I don't know if you're watching. I know I love Bill's story because he saw a UFO on the ground in Belleville, Texas. Now that is kind of in the boonies, but he saw one hovering off the ground, and it's totally true story. I actually told his story on Coast to Coast AM one night because it was so interesting seeing one on the ground. That's really rare to see a UFO hovering over the ground, but he did with his whole family. So he got out of the car, he walked around the bend to look at it. You could see the grass under it, it was swaying and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden it was just gone. I mean, just took off. So it's definitely, I mean, they're out there. I don't know what they are, but they're out there. Let's see, Wacky Wayfarer. UFOs are real. Even Air Force generals have admitted stories. Definitely look at all the Navy stuff that's coming out. And that they're finally admitting to all these different guys that have seen UFOs. Captains, airline pilots. Of course, they call them Foo Fighters. I think that's where that name for the band comes from, is what the airline pilots call these UFOs that they see all the time. And some of that Navy footage that got out where they saw the UFOs going back and forth. I think there's just too much of it out there to deny it anymore. I mean, I don't know what they're here, what they want, but they're definitely out there. And I always go back to Roswell. Roswell always made a big impression on me. The UFO crash at Roswell, 1947 in New Mexico, because I knew a guy that my cousin was good friends with, a producer of the TV show Unsolved Mysteries, and of course that's my favorite show of all time. You can't beat it. And so I was really lucky when my cousin told me, "Hey, I'm friends with one of the producers on the show. His name's Sam Lucchese, like the boot." And I was like, "Wow, I get to meet this guy." He was having a party over at his house in Los Angeles where my cousin was living. I don't remember what year this was, maybe late 80s, early 90s. I mean, not too far off when I saw that UFO. and I got to meet this guy. And first thing I asked Sam was, after meeting him, was like, "What about the Unsolved Mysteries episode on Roswell?" I said, "That's always been my favorite. What was that like? Were you involved in it?" He goes, "Yeah, I was one of the producers on that, and I was there. He did all the head of all the props and everything they did, setting up all the interviews with the witnesses." And he said, when I did that show, I didn't believe in UFOs whatsoever. He said, I just thought it was nonsense, just fiction and, just stuff for movies. He said, but when I met all those surviving people, because a lot of them were still alive when Unsolved Mysteries did their episode on it. He said, I met them all. And he said, I'm telling you what, every one of them's telling the truth about what they saw that day. And he goes, and it totally changed my mind about the existence of UFOs and alien technology and all this kind of stuff. So that blew me away. The guy told me that sitting by him on his couch at his house at a party. So I was like, man, that's huge. And then, of course, know about the teletext with Raimi, where he's holding that famous teletext over where they were doing that charade of calling it a downed weather balloon. That's complete nonsense. It wasn't a downed weather balloon what those guys saw. But anyway, it's what they call the smoking gun of Roswell, where they're holding that teletext type over, and some guy put that into the computer and started enhancing it and making out a lot of the words. And you saw words like bodies, and you saw the word disc, and you couldn't make them all out. But back then they never would have known we would have had the technology to take a photograph from 1947 and zoom in on it like that and start picking out the words. So I totally believe that's what was on that teletext. And he, unfortunately, when he was squatting down by Raimi, and I can't, who was the guy that was with Raimi? I forgot. I'm sure Patty. Tell me. And you could start making out the words, but the part of that teletext was shown over to where the camera caught a picture of it. And with today's technology, we're able to zoom in on that and get a lot of the words out. It said bodies, disc. It was clear they were talking about a cover up, and it was an alien craft that had crashed at Roswell. So 100% believe that. And I wish the guys would talk about when it first crashed. There were some students that were on site before. I think it was that actually saw the crash first were some the geology students from Texas Tech University were there, and I don't know if any of those guys ever spoke. I don't Bob Schmidt is a writer that talks a lot about Roswell. Has a book on two books out on Roswell. He knows it probably better than anybody. But I remember those Texas Tech students were like the first that saw the crash site. But I don't know if they got them to shut up, never talked, and that was before I think Mac Brazel saw the wreckage that he saw, because there was two crash sites. The ship crashed, and I think then it bounced or something, and then it had went to its final resting place. But there was a professor from Texas Tech University and at least 4 or 5 of his students that were doing some kind of geology stuff out there in nowhere Roswell, and they stumbled upon it too and saw some of this stuff going on before Mac Brazel got involved, the ranch hand. And of course, Brazel left. He told some other people about it, and that's all pretty well documented what he saw. And of course, they made him just shut up. I mean, they just said quit talking. They threatened him a lot. If you talk, bad things are going to happen. And you didn't see what you thought you saw. And they said it just broke the guy. It just, like, he was otherwise a pretty nice guy, and it just broke him because he knew he couldn't talk about what he saw that day. So it was brutal. And then in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, they talked to Jesse Marcel Jr., who was just a little boy at the time, and his father, Jesse Marcel Sr., was one of the officers there at Roswell, that bomber group that was there, and he wound up being in possession of some of the materials scraped up at Roswell. And they always talked about one seemed like a type of wood, like a petrified wood, and another was like something that looked like foil that you could wad up really hard, and it would just go back to its original shape immediately. And one thing that Jesse Marcel Jr. remembered was his father came home from being on base, the night after the military got involved and started collecting up the wreckage from this UFO crash, and he laid it out on their kitchen table at night. And he said, "Well, hey, look at this stuff." And young Jesse Marcel was like in awe, like, "What is this stuff?" And he remembered this little purple, what he called an I beam, that had what looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics on it. And he told that story. I can't remember how old Jesse Jr. was at the time. I think he was 10 or so, but he never forgot that those scraps from the UFO crash being on his kitchen table. And Jesse Marcel Jr. never ever changed his story about what happened that night and what he saw, that little I beam. He even drew a little picture of it with the hieroglyphics on it. and Jesse Marcel Jr. went on to become a flight surgeon. I mean, he was in the military himself, like his father, so he was had a lot of credibility. Never ever changed a story about that stuff that he saw. Extract the victims from, yeah, I think the Roswell teletext said something like extract the victims from the wreck. Yeah, you're right. It did. It said disc. It said the word disc. And then some of them they could just kind of make out what the word should have said on that teletext. Bodies, I think was one. It had like BOD, maybe the eye was missing, stuff like that. But it's clear what they were talking about. That they did recover a craft and all the stuff that went on there. And that is the smoking gun, was that teletext, because they couldn't hide it then. They never knew we'd have the technology to zoom in on that sucker. I mean, you talk about crimes that are solved because they didn't have DNA back in the day. Well, back then they would have never fathomed that we would have the technology that we do now to zoom in on a photograph taken in 1947. It was one that was part of that. I think it was part of the National Archives, that photo, because of course that's the one they put out there that said, "Oh, it was nothing. It was just a weather balloon." What a bunch of nonsense. I know there's a book out there that tries to state that whole weather balloon thing is true, and it was something about a balloon they weren't supposed to have up because of like nuclear secrets and the Russians and all this nonsense. That's BS. It's absolute. Um, any thoughts on the Tic Tac UFO sightings? I don't know. I've heard of those, Steve. That space, that size of UFO that looks like a big Tic Tac, and there's been a lot of sightings of those. I saw a triangle, and you hear a lot about the triangles, and I don't know if that's it's just one of the more popular ones are triangles. But he's right. There are some Tic Tac shaped UFOs as well. You don't see you hear as much anymore about the typical saucer shaped UFOs, but absolutely, I believe Roswell happened. It did for whatever reason. I know the weather was bad that night. Maybe lightning struck it, and it just caused something with their computers, and the ship crashed. Like I said, hit the ground and kind of hit it hard, and it bounced back up, and then it had another crash site after that. That's when they found the bodies. There was three bodies, I believe, and one they were two dead and one was still alive. I believe that they claimed was a female. I don't know how they would have known if it was a female or not because they were aliens, but three or four, but one of them was still alive, and I believe it's what they claimed was a female that they took back to Area 51. And then when you talk about Area 51, you kind of get into the Bob Lazar stuff. That's my daughter's favorite video I ever did, was how bizarre it's Bob Lazar. And I know Joe Rogan had Bob Lazar on. Of course, he's the guy that claims that he was at Area 51 and saw the flying saucers from Roswell, and the propulsion systems and all that. And Lazar comes off as a really smart guy, and he owns a shop that sells all these real rare earth elements and hard to find stuff, and he does pretty well at it, and he is a smart guy, just no doubt about it. Bob Lazar is a very smart guy. The only problem I have with him is that he did lie about his education, because maybe he knew that if he was ever going to have access to be able to be at Area 51 like that, he'd have to have a background like going to MIT. And I think he said he went to MIT. Of course, that's Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and that just never panned out. He's not in the yearbooks. No one from there knew him, and I believe the government can scrub stuff like that, but I just don't see it with Lazar. He for some reason he lied about his education. I think with Lazar is he probably either had good secondhand knowledge of what was going on there enough to present it. Is if it was himself, or maybe he saw some of it at a lighter capacity, but apparently he lied about his education, and that hurts the rest of his story. It just does. If he's going to lie about that, what else is he lying about? But and this is coming from somebody who believes they have the craft from Roswell, so I don't know what to make of Bob Lazar, but he's definitely worth checking out. I know he's done a lot of stuff with George Knapp, Coast to Coast in Las Vegas, investigative reporter. A lot of good stuff with him. Um, the Allagash story, the Allagash 4, what was that? Was that that was in 76, I think, where those guys were camping and the UFO came along, and then they got sucked up into the UFO, and they had memories of being on the ship and them running experiments on those four guys. I've always believed that story. And that's a good one. Unsolved Mysteries did that as well. Robert Stack covered that. That I think it was the Allagash 4, and that's a great one to definitely check out. And I think that I believe it. I just believe for whatever reason that's what happened. And then you have the stuff about the cattle mutilations that they find everywhere, where these cattle have been found on these ranches where all their insides have been surgically removed. It's like, the best surgeons in the world couldn't have done it as clean as this is done. If they just needed those parts, why wouldn't they be hacked up? Or if it was like devil worshippers, it would be blood everywhere and some of the parts laying on the ground. But they're like surgically removed with high heat or something, where there's some kind of technology involved in removing these parts from all these cattle. Talking about the DB Cooper thing at the Tina bar where the money was found, it was rumored that there was some cattle around the Tina bar where the DB Cooper money was found that were mutilated, that looked like it was some kind of alien involvement, where there was no obvious signs of just people hacking at them with knives and stuff, or just killing them and then just hacking them up. It was like somebody was definitely after, studying their inner workings. I don't know why you would just be mainly doing cattle, but that's what was going on there. Patty, I saw the Allagash story on Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah, that was a good one. Um, that's definitely worth checking out. Going back to YouTube and checking out the Allagash story. There's those guys' stories never change, not one iota. Uh, Patty, you said you saw a cigar-shaped UFO in Pennsylvania, not far from Kecksburg. I don't know where Kecksburg is. Is that near like Franklin or something? But yeah, those are interesting. I don't know where the cigar-shaped ones are coming from, but she said I've never seen a UFO, but my grandma told me she saw one. She saw one in her diary, in her dairy farm in the 50s. That's cool. Yeah, there was a lot of sightings back in the 50s and stuff like that. These people that saw them, they didn't know what they were, especially that was just after War of the Worlds. What was War of the Worlds in the late mid 40s, and before that happened, no one even knew what it was. Well, hey, there you are, Life After Life. How you doing? I'll tell you my story when you come on the show Tuesday. Cool. Yeah, I want to hear it. I love a good UFO story. Uh, there's just so many. There can't be enough. But the crazy thing like about mine is how it looked like they were trying to tell me through my TV that it doesn't matter what you saw, we have control of this stuff. She said, came over to my house in the middle of the night and lit up the field and the area around the house. Yeah, see, I believe that. Why would your grandparents lie about something like that? They wouldn't. They absolutely wouldn't. So those are the great stories too when they're passed down from a parent or a grandparent. Yeah, that stuff's out there. I don't know exactly what it is, if they're coming through a portal, or if they're time travelers, or if it's us in the future coming back, or they're just from so many light years away and they have the ability to travel here like they do. I believe it. Maybe that explains missing time, or things like shadow people, or just on another frequency, or multiverse stuff out there. I don't know, but I believe him. I saw one. I believe that one did crash in Roswell, New Mexico. I firmly believe that. I'm sure we still have it. May not still be at Area 51, but they have that craft. And I think it's purported that they have 3 recovered UFO craft from various places, and they, definitely Roswell. And I think another one might have been Belleville, Illinois, where they say a couple of those from Roswell come from, but they still mention the hieroglyphics are on it, which ties back to ancient Egypt. And it looked like the Egyptians had some kind of alien technology. How did they build the pyramids? It looks like they had some form of alien technology, and that could tie back. They maybe the Egyptians knew they were from outer space. That's why they were given the technology to build the pyramids. Patty, there was a big sighting in Kecksburg in 1965 or so. The military came in and made all the witnesses leave, and then the army carted off some giant thing on a truck. I think I remember that one, or a case like that, where somebody, the first people that stumbled upon it, actually got a photograph of it, and the photograph was out there for years until they found out who had it and got rid of it. But that could have been that case, or one like it, where they came in, the 2 people that reported it. Some guy actually had an old style camera back in the day and just shot a picture of it, and they said it was really convincing. And then uh, many years later, I think the guy even had it on a wall at one point till I think the feds finally caught up and took the picture from him. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that story. Remind me where that happened. But yeah, I definitely want to get into some more UFO stuff, just in the vein of Art Bell and the great stories that would come up, and the people telling them on coast to coast. Like I loved all the UFO ones, and Missing Time. I love Missing Time. Some guy called in, and I think it might have been on Georgia's show, not ours, where he was left somewhere from South Carolina. I guess he was going from Cuba or something on a boat, and he was literally wound up missing an entire day of time, and he could not ever explain where he had been, where he'd gone, and it's just a complete day was missing. I love stuff like that. Oh yeah, Phoenix Lights, Chris. That's always a great thing. I totally believe the Phoenix Lights. maybe a secret project from the Area 51. Could be. I think actor Kurt Russell was flying that night around the Phoenix Lights, and he talks about it a lot. His experience with it. I'm pretty sure it's Kurt Russell. I like Kurt Russell, and he said that he saw a lot of that, from flying in the area that night. I mean, nothing could explain the Phoenix Lights. That thing was huge over a major city. That formation that it made, and of course the mayor, whatever, came out with the alien guy dressed up, trying to make fun of it all. Probably because they were told to, because everybody knew that was some extreme show of force with the aliens happening down. That was like Independence Day going on with the Phoenix Lights. So that one definitely needs more study for sure. But yeah, I believe him, and definitely believe Roswell. Believe like the Allagash story. Believe who's the other one? Who's the fire? Sorry, Travis Scott. That fire in the sky. That was a good one. Marfa Lights is a good one. Patty. Uh, was that was it? It was Travis Walton. I'm sorry, what did I say? Scott. I'm thinking of DB Cooper or something. It was Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky. I know Joe Rogan had him on, and he's got a really believable story. I know like 6 or 7 months ago, somebody tried to come out and claim the story was bogus, that he made it up or something, but it didn't really go anywhere. I don't know what the person's intent was for trying to go after Travis Walton, but that story's been out there for a long time, with Travis Walton getting taken up by the UFO and running experiments on him and all that. And that story never changed either. Like the Allagash guys and the people that were around Travis Walton, remember they were out there. I think they were. Loggers or something out in the middle of the woods, and they remember the guy getting, they all, remembered seeing the UFO, and then all of a sudden Travis was gone, and then he's somehow transported back later. Uh, but yeah, I was talking about Bob Lazar a little bit earlier. I think Lazar probably saw some things, or he at least got secondhand knowledge. Like my problem with Lazar is he lied about his education. Maybe because he knew that he'd have to have some kind of pretty big education to ever be granted that kind of access uh, to see what he saw. So I think he said he went to MIT and then another school in California. But he was never in any of the yearbooks. No one from those colleges ever remembered the guy. Uh, he's a really interesting guy, super smart. I think he had like some souped up car or something, and he was in Vegas a long time ago that got on the front of a magazine. But Lazard, he definitely lied about his education. I don't know why he did it, but that can't be explained. I don't think that. I mean, I definitely don't trust the FBI and the CIA, but I don't think they're going to go scrub yearbooks. And Lazard definitely lied about his education, so that just hurts his entire story. Um, I don't know why though, but yeah, Lazar, the jury's still out. I know I did a video on him about a year ago or so where I basically said he was lying, but I don't think he's completely lying. I think he's got knowledge secondhand, or maybe he had some lower level access. If did he actually see the crafts there or not? I'd believe him if it weren't for the fact he got caught lying about the education stuff. I mean, I don't know why he would have done that. It's almost like, well, we'll let you see it, but we're going to have to force you to tell a lie so you don't have complete believability. Something weird like that. I mean, I know the guys that are around him, like George Knapp, fully believe him. Jeremy Corbell, that did the movie about Lazar, the documentary that's only about a year old now, totally believes him. So he's got that store that sells all that crazy stuff that does well. So he doesn't need the money, and he's never gone after money with his story either. So that bodes well in his favor. But the education deal, I'm still trying to get around with that with Lazar. Uh, he did bring up some things that did become true. Element, yeah, it's true. He did bring up the element 115. Didn't he claim to have some of that element? And I think George Knapp reported that the feds broke into his house, either looking for it or took part of it or something. Bob Lazard's house, he did have that some of that element 115 in possession of it, and they broke into his house, or somebody broke in. Yeah, he said yes, looking for that element that he had. I think that is true. I remember George Knapp talking about that. Yeah, probably with Bob Lazar. So who knows? I know the guy sells a bunch of weird stuff like that. So maybe that's why I had it, but I don't know why he lied about his education. Don't think he ever went to MIT. I think he was a mediocre high school student, and guys that get levels that get to go see spacecraft usually have top of their class, MIT, Harvard or something. Definitely MIT because it's technical, but I don't know why he lied about that, but he did. He lied about his education for whatever reason, so it just hurts his story. But yeah, that element 115, if he has that, definitely, I think he knows something. I do. I think Lazar knows something. Maybe he did see a few things and just knew he had to paint it a different way. The Aurora, Texas incident from 1897. Is that the one where they think the alien got buried in the cemetery and or down the well? That was the one that one in Texas is where the alien was put down the well. And there was, I can't remember. And they actually marked the grave for a long, long time. Of course, it's gone now, but it was either the well in the cemetery or in that cemetery. They had claimed that there was a UFO crash nearby and that the townspeople actually buried the alien and they've never found it. Chris says yes. Um, I'd love to interview George Knapp. I used to see him on some of the old unsolved mystery shows, and it looks like he didn't age a bit from then. You know, George looked about the same age 30 years ago as he does now, which is pretty cool. He's like holding it together. And I know he does all the Skinwalker Ranch stuff. George does a ton of the Skinwalker Ranch, where all those crazy happenings that happen there, and all the weird stuff that happens was in. Yeah, the Rothschild said yes in the cemetery. I think they tried to get something going with that, but never could find it. They could never find exactly where the alien was buried. I don't think that was, but I thought maybe the alien could have been buried in the well, but they couldn't find exactly. If it wasn't in the well, they couldn't find exactly where in the cemetery that the alien would have been buried. And who knows? By now they probably dug up the alien a long time ago. But yeah, that's a great story, and that story's has stayed around for a long, long time. The one about that alien in Aurora, Texas, in 1897. So I believe it. You know, like it definitely could have happened. I mean, especially back then, because they probably had the technology to get here for a long, long time. But that's all I have for now. Just definitely wanted to get something going on UFOs, and I want to keep bringing the UFO thing back just to keep, just to harken to the old days of Coast to Coast with Art Bell and, some of the George Norrie days. But I long for the Art Bell days the best, and just the crazy stuff that would happen with that show and the people calling in and making comments. So, Chris said they found the body in an unmarked grave. No conclusion. Wow, that's interesting. I want to go read about that some more. But thanks for watching, guys. I'll do another upload probably probably Wednesday. But hope everybody has a good week. Thanks for watching.